See, this is a good example of why time in the market is better than timing the market. Amortization, bit of a difficult one to say that. Right, everybody, welcome. So we're going to be doing a series now where I break down each of the properties that we've purchased over the years in our property portfolio breakdown. So if you've come halfway through in the series, don't forget to go all the way back to the beginning, watch them all the way through one after the other, and then we'll do a summary at the end. Hopefully you're going to find this really interesting and kind of my journey on our property breakdown, which you'll see in other videos I feed in as a general thing. So here you're going to get the real meaty information. And then that information will be summarized at the end. So when you watch other videos and I say, so our property portfolio is XYZ, then you understand where that comes from. So you can watch these videos over and over again. Nice little series. And as I say, if you've come in halfway through, don't forget to go back to the beginning and watch them all the way through. Otherwise they won't make sense. Right, we're going to start with property one. So property one, my very first one. So this was a particularly poor property. So it was a two-bed flat. It was back in the days, just after the financial crash, for those of you that are old enough to remember that. I think you've got to be like of a certain age to possibly remember that. So that probably ages me now. But basically, this particular property was a victim of the financial crash. So the particular owners hadn't paid their mortgage, they hadn't paid their service charge, and the place was in an absolute state. And we call it the smelly cat wee property, which I'll come on to in a minute as to why we call it that. So I went round to view this property, and the estate agent that showed me round wouldn't even go in the flat. The communal hallway was so bad from the smell that they waited outside. And what happened is this particular owner had obviously had the bailiffs or whatever knock on the front door, and they had opened the front door, and then the people had climbed out the back of out of the property and then drove off. But they left behind 2 dogs and 4 cats. So you can imagine how much mess that flat was in to start with. But then on top of that, the RSPCA or the local, I don't know if it was the RSPCA actually, whoever locally houses animals, didn't have the room for them. So the estate agent that had been appointed basically was instructed by the mortgage company to go round and put food down for them, and they'll be back the next day. So you can imagine what the state of the place was like before that happened, and then even after that. And in fact, actually the fire brigade had to come and kick a wall down because a cat had got stuck behind a cylinder heater, so we had to repair that as well. This was a pretty daunting project for me to take off as my first one, so big shout out to my dad and various other people that kind of encouraged me to buy it, because I probably might have wimped out on it if I'm dead honest with you, but I'm glad I did it. And we refurbished that property, and then now it's fully rented out. It's been like that for a long period of time. The interesting thing is we were going to live in it, but then we later decided to rent that out, because in the UK you can't do a buy-to-let if you don't already own a property. So we thought we'd start our journey buying this particular flat. It was probably a bit too small for us. We had 2 kids at the time, young ones, so it was never going to suit us, no matter what our circumstances were in life and where we were going to go, because it was a bit too small. But so this particular property, we paid 102,500 for. Now I know some of you will go, that's a 2-bed property in the southeast. Now that's pretty cheap. Obviously, don't forget this is like 2010, so 14 years ago. And we're in the southeast of England, so prices are more expensive. Obviously, this would get you a lot more if you were, say, in Wales. So we purchased this particular property, and then we spent about £8,500 on it, doing it up. I did most of the work on it. I got someone in to fit the kitchen, put the carpets down, that sort of stuff. But generally speaking, we did pretty much all of the refurbishment ourselves. So I'm in at this point here for 1,100. Okay, so I'm in there for that amount of money. And what happened was we then remortgaged it, and we were able to remortgage it for £140,000, which was about the going rate for a flat that was all done up at the time. So you can see here that I've created, when you take away this and this, £29,000 worth of equity here in this particular property. I then remortgaged it, drew out some of this money to pay off this, because obviously I'd spent that money doing it up. And then we decided to use the rest of the money that we had drawn out to back up our savings so that we could move on to property number 2. So you can see here, so you've got 102,500, and the important thing to do with that is, although as we go through this journey, this won't always be the case, but obviously this is a good example of why time in the market is better than timing the market. Because we paid, so let's round the figures down, and we say we pay £100,000 for it now, and then we will have a £75,000 mortgage on it, because buy-to-let mortgages, or even though this was a residential one to start with, that back in the financial crash, it was always a 25% deposit. So our mortgage was 75k, and a property was purchase price of 100k. If we hadn't have remortgaged it, I know we did to release some money out of it, in today's market, this property is worth about 200k, and our mortgage would still have been 75k. So you can see I've eroded the mortgage just simply by the fact the property has gone up over inflation. This particular 75k is interest only. So yeah, I agree. People always wonder, and they say, well, how are you ever going to pay off the 75 grand? You're going to get to the end of the mortgage term, and that's that. Well, with commercial mortgages, which is what this has become eventually with a buy-to-let, they don't care so much about your age, because obviously it's a business model, so there's no ticking time bomb. And secondly, the longer and longer I can sit on that 75 grand, the less and less it's worth. If I loan Danny £1,000 today, in about 50 years' time, assuming I'm still here, it won't be worth £1,000 at all. It will be worth very little money. That is what inflation does. So in some of the other videos I refer to how, although inflation's a pain when you go to the shop and you buy a packet of crisps and it's double the price, it actually also works in your favour if you're borrowing money against that, because time will erode that 25%, and here I don't know what the percentage is because my maths isn't particularly that good, but you can see it's over 50% of the property that we've owned. So that is property number 1, and a brief synopsis of how we came to that deal. Currently, when the tenant first moved in, I think they paid I want to say like 625, I think. Bearing in mind, not 625k, just 625. And right now I think they pay about 1,200. So you can see it's almost doubled in that period of time, the same kind of doubling that we've got on the valuation of the rent, of the property price, sorry. So again, this has gone up, this has stayed the same, and the payments into this would have stayed the same, so the profitability has increased over time. So that's property number 1. So just as a side note, as a takeaway, just quickly on the remortgaging front, obviously you can see here the property is, the mortgage is based on the purchase price, not this 8.5. That obviously I've spent that out of my own pocket. I didn't actually spend it out of my own pocket. I managed to get it on credit cards with like 90-day payment terms, so that, because I knew this was my exit strategy. But you can say we pay £100,000 and the price is 75k. That is because there's 25% has to remain in the property. Back then, even with residential, with your own property, you had to leave 25% in. Obviously nowadays there's a lot higher, you can get 5% or even 10. But buy-to-let properties have always been 25%. That's been like that really since the financial crash. So here, when we get the valuation of £140,000, we can leave in 25% of that. So if you take £140,000 and say, right, I'm going to leave in 25% of it because that is what I have, what I've got to leave in. So you're looking at, that's 35k, okay? So I've got to leave in 35k, which means I can draw out 105k. But obviously I've got a mortgage of 75k, which I need to pay off, because obviously when I've refinanced, you've got to pay off the old finance. So we pay off the old finance, which is 75k. One minus the other leaves you with 30k income. So we've got 30k left at the bottom. I've refinanced it. Obviously now my mortgage is 105, not 75. So if we go back up to here and we say, oh dear, this is now 105. Okay, obviously that changes all these figures, but you can see how even then this has been eroded by the fact that it's gone up in value. So even the fact that I refinance. Now, some people will go on to refinance this again at a later date to fund other things, and I have done that, but I'm a firm believer of what they call the BRRRR strategy, which is basically buy, refurbish, rent, repeat, and refinance, as another R on that, where basically you've purchased it, you've refurbished it, and then you've refinanced it, and then you've rented it out, okay? At the point where you refinance it, this is the 105k, that would be where you would leave it. You wouldn't keep refinancing it, because what you want to do is make sure you're always getting this kind of nice sweet spot where you've got that good equity in your portfolio and you're not what they call over gearing yourself, and you end up with a kind of, oh, I own 25% of it and there's 75% of it is mortgaged, and then the rates go up or something happens, and then obviously your equity would then be eroded into that. So if the property prices went down, for instance, then obviously that's going to affect that. So we try to run it around between 50 and 60% loan to value. So 40% to 50% we will loan, and the other 50% to 60% we will have on a mortgage. That gives us a nice buffer. We'd kind of try not to go out of that as a rule of thumb. Everybody will have their own risk tolerance to that. But yeah, that's the kind of information on remortgaging. Don't forget to subscribe. It will give you a little alert and you'll be able to see that we've uploaded a new video. And don't forget to comment below. That actually helps the algorithm, and it will then pump the video out to a wider audience and hopefully help more people that will be of interest. So subscribe, like, comment. There are 3 things to do. Thank you for watching the video all the way through.